Welcome to the Optimal Truth Network. Here we are dedicated to bringing you relevant and timely information. Our culture is ever changing. With that, we face challenges which are vast and complex. Amid the chaos, we hope to be a calming and rational resource for you and your family. To stay tuned to the Optimal Truth Network, visit us at baldwincounty.sra.org and subscribe to our email newsletter. Again, that's baldwincounty.sra.org. Simply provide your name and email and get the latest and most relevant information. Thank you for joining us. Now, enjoy this latest discussion from our Optimal Truth host, Jason Mann.
I think in this episode, I've actually tried to film this content a couple of times and never could quite get it refined in, I guess, the message that I was wanting to convey with this conversation. In our last conversation, or in one of our previous conversations, we dove a little bit into the world of religion and different spiritual points of view when it comes to our approach to sexuality. And even with those points of view about sexuality, we were attempting to convey that it wasn't just the state that imposes regulations on human sexuality, especially as it relates to our youth. I think I've mentioned before, and if I haven't, this may be the first time that I mention it, is the modern legal philosophy of virtue jurisprudence. So virtue jurisprudence is a way of approaching laws that help us regulate things with appropriate ethics and morality. When it comes to youth and sex, virtue jurisprudence has dictated many laws that help us regulate it. Things like pedophilia, bestiality, incest, rape, sexual assault, all of these things are examples of virtue jurisprudence helping us regulate what is appropriate for youth and sexual expression and what is not appropriate. Even most states have laws that deal with the age of consent. Here in Alabama, the age of consent to be able to willfully engage in a sexual relationship is 16 years old. The reason why I bring that up is because it's not just virtue jurisprudence that helps us with ethics and morals when it comes to teens and sex, but even some of the major world religions help us understand certain ethics and morality, and how even our belief systems regulate what's appropriate when it comes to sexual expression for teens and our youth. The reason why I revisit that portion of that conversation is because we have embraced an aspect of our culture of allowing such polarizing and differing opinions that it's hard for us to reconcile the truth or the common ground. And we want to be able to understand that it's not just a spiritual conversation or a legal conversation, but it's a cultural and a social conversation as well. We know that we deal with social constructs. We know we deal with certain frames of thought or societal philosophies that when we engage with each other in public settings, we can find ourselves polarized in extreme points of view. And oftentimes when we get polarized and galvanized in our position, it's hard for us to hear the other side of an argument. With recent events that occurred, and just so you know that I'm not using this as an opportunity to gain clout or traction online or an attempt to go viral, I'm not even going to name names, but I think we're all very aware of some recent events, tragic events that occurred, and it all happened because of differing opinions. And I think we as an American culture know that we can have different positions. We can disagree, but it doesn't mean that we ever stop trying to be more informed and empathetic towards another point of view. I think that's what helps us to consolidate ideas so that we can be a more well rounded and better informed society when it comes to key issues we're facing. So, how does all of this correlate to the conversation of today? Well, there are three articles that I have in my possession. The title of one article is Are Young People Having Enough Sex? Another one is Gen Z is Afraid of Sex and for Good Reason. And the third article that I have is titled Sexual Conservatism, Virginity, and Why Gen Z is Having Less Sex. Now, all three of these articles are exploring the concept that Gen Z is having less sex at their age than previous generations did. Let's just go with Gen X and the millennials, because that right now, I think those are the two most prominent generations that we can compare Gen Z to. I think each of these articles were spurred on by the release of a recent book. The book is titled The Second Coming: Sex and the Next Generation's Fight Over Its Future, and the author of that book is Carter Sherman. Now, why do I bring these up? I think I bring these up mainly because we're dealing with very relevant and very significant cultural shifts in America. I don't think any of us that have kept our finger on the pulse of society are unaware of some significant shifts in cultural movements. We have seen extremes on all ends of the spectrum. We know that there are many discussions going on around youth and sexuality. We're dealing with gender ideology. We're dealing with sexual orientation. We're dealing with the biological condition of gender and sex. And what does that mean with one's personal concept of themselves, how they approach sex, how they approach relationships? I don't think that it's possible for us to approach the conversation of youth and sex like there is a void. Because the human condition warrants the need for sex, whether it's for feelings of acceptance and love, whether it's purely for pleasure, or even if it's for pure procreative efforts, whatever the case may be, there is no void when it comes to human sexuality. In other words, the situations in which a person may legitimately be considered asexual, or let's just give it the term celibacy, meaning that they have no desire for sexual expression, no avenue for sexual expression, and therefore they themselves do not express themselves in a sexual way. Those situations and those individuals are very rare. So that means the majority of humanity will be expressing themselves sexually. And we have seen this over generations, centuries, and millennia. I think for the overall cultural impact of how we as a human race express ourselves sexually, we've only been able to present the quantitative results of that within the past century. Because where we're at with the advances of technology, we've been able to gather that information better and present it in quantitative numbers so that we can gain a better perspective of what's actually going on. With that quantitative research, we've been able to see that where we're at as a culture today, that only 30% of high schoolers in America have ever had any sexual experience of any kind. And because that number is the lowest that it's been in decades, we have individuals that are expressing concerns over the lack of sex among Gen Zers. And let's just say if that trend continues, then it may continue into the Generation Alpha, which are the younger ones that are coming up through your middle schools right now. So why is it relevant to concern ourselves with whether younger generations are having sex or not? On the one hand, we could say it's a victory. hey, this is a win. If they're not physically having sex, then maybe we have a chance to get some reprieve from the high rates of STD infections that are happening among the youth of America. And maybe we get a chance to be able to get some reprieve from teen pregnancy and teen birth rates. Maybe. But on the other hand, because there's no void when it comes to sexual expression, just because our youth are not expressing themselves in physical sexual encounters, it doesn't mean that they're not expressing themselves in some sexual way. We're dealing with a culture that has allowed pornography to permeate our ideas of sexuality. It is free access to anyone. Anyone. Matter of fact, we have evidence that online pornography begins targeting our kids as young as 8 years old. Why? Because I think they would want addicts for life. This conversation isn't really about pornography. We can delve into that conversation at a later time. But this conversation is not so much about what they're doing sexually, but it's the why they're not having physical sexual encounters. Again, we can say that's a win, but then we really need to understand maybe the why. In other words, because there's no void when it comes to sexual expression, then how are they expressing themselves, which translates into why there's a decrease into physical sexual encounters among our youth? Is it because the overuse of pornography? And then we have to ask, does pornography, does that serve as a good example of healthy sexual expression? Is it the onset of chatbots and AI relationship bots? Are these taking the place of physical sexual encounters? And those that are seeking connection are emotionally connecting to AI entities? We don't know. I don't think that we have enough data that helps us understand all the ways that youth are expressing themselves sexually these days. But why should we be concerned with it in the first place? These articles, they're asserting that the lack of sex among the Gen Z population is a problem. And they even go on to assert that it's something that we should do something about. So I guess the question is, what? What should we do about it? Should we view it as a problem, and should we do something about it? Some of the writers of these articles, as they do a literature review of Carter Sherman's book, they're wanting to assert that it's conservative approaches to the conversations about sexuality that have simply produced fear amongst the youth. And so they're not expressing themselves in physical sexual relationships out of fear. I wonder, though, as we deal with the onset of pervasive pornography, which typically depicts sex and relationships in very unhealthy circumstances, and I also wonder with the onset of the facade of AI relationships and intimacy, are we actually dealing with a culture that has seen through the facade and they're tired of what the world is offering them? Could it be possible? Could we entertain that the youth of America want something real and they want something authentic? Could it be that our polarized and extreme positions on human sexuality have revealed the true nature of the darkness of sexual perversion? And again, we can experience sexual perversion not just from religious perspective, but even from a moral, ethical, and legal perspective. Because virtue jurisprudence helps us ethically govern how we operate as a society, even how we express ourselves sexually. I'll be sure to link these articles in the show notes and you can go down and read them for yourself. But I would encourage you to read these and become informed on the issues of Gen Z and sexual expression. You know, our culture is confused when it comes to sexuality. Largely, it's confused. There are a lot of voices saying a lot of things about how young people should be treating sex, sexually expressing themselves, and how relationships should go. But remember, the goal here at Optimal Truth is not so much to tell them what they ought to do, but it's more to educate them on the truth and the facts of what's healthiest. It's to empower them to stand for themselves and their personal decisions and choices. And it's also to equip them with skills so that they can pursue what they deem as healthiest for them. The hope is that once they have the facts, the evidence, and the research, that our youth would be able to see what is healthiest, what is most appropriate, and what will lead to the healthiest outcomes as they work through the development of their sexual health and what relationships they pursue in the future. Thank you for tuning in this time. I hope this was just a helpful look into what is going on culturally and the conversations that are being had on a broader spectrum when it comes to how young people are approaching sex and relationships these days. There are many other points in here that we can explore in greater detail at a later time, things like pornography, things like AI, and we will explore those. So just stay tuned and we're going to get to those. But today I want you to read these articles, and if you will please take the time to interact with us on YouTube. Leave us a comment and your points of view and your insights on what your takeaway is from these articles. And the biggest thing is, we can't overstate this enough, is as the responsible adult members of our society that are not only seeking to contribute to the health and well-being of our homes and our youth, but our community at large, I encourage you to be informed, to have a greater understanding of what's going on with the youth of America today so that you can be an advocate for their health and well-being. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
We hope you not only enjoyed this episode, but more importantly, we hope you were able to get some critical information takeaways. Please give us some feedback and send us your questions. As a community, we rely upon all of you to refine our message. Give us a like, share our content with your friends and family, and be sure to subscribe to our network. Thanks for tuning in into Optimal Truth.